Hi all, I'm going to continue my look at Fischer's 11-0 clean sweep of the 1963 US Chess Championship. In round 9, he was playing D.Byrne, who must have been quite frightened by Fischer's 8 wins in a row, and thinking he might be the 9th victim. He played G3 as white, it's an unusual opening move. After C5 he fianchettoed that bishop, and after knight c6 he played for a kind of closed Sicilian strategy where white has a kind of coiled spring set up, so he's avoiding all the immediate tactics and instead playing to put his pieces behind the pawns. So maybe this f4 pawn is going to be a battering ram later for black's king. However, Fischer's king was never really in trouble in this game, as we're going to see. He reinforces that f5 square now by playing e6, and he keeps his pawn structure quite flexible, and his knight comes to e7 instead of f6, so potentially he can also answer with f5 if necessary. White castled here, and instead of routinely castling, actually he played rook b8 with the idea of stretching, gaining space on the queen side, and gaining and increasing intensity on these dark squares. So as we'll see, after knight d2, d6, Byrne was keen to stop this simple plan, and he played a4. But actually, this really doesn't do much for black's attack on the queen side. In a way, it kind of fuels it, because black's going to play b5 anyway, which he does now. So although white temporarily gains that open line, black will later seize that a-file, as we'll see. First now we see though the pressure on the dark squares mounting from this pawn and this dark squared bishop. It's difficult for white to parry this. Already in fact I would say black has a slight advantage. My analytical assistant believes so as well. So white played now c4, which is a major concession for this central d4 square. So after knight d4, white was also reinforcing against f5. So white's discouraged now from playing f5, it would simply lose a pawn because of this extra pressure on it. White's therefore played g5 and kind of resigned himself to black's control of the dark squares and not playing f5. It's kind of a miserable position to have with the white pieces now. Fischer starts exerting pressure on the light squares indirectly by playing bishop d7, so the bishop's going to come to this diagonal. And the light squares will also be pressurized. So after queen c7 though, knight takes d4, bishop takes d4. These exchanges don't relieve the pressure. After bishop g7, black prompted white to play rook b1, but this gives black now the a-file. So that a4 plan wasn't particularly preventive for black gaining advantage on the queen side. White now tries to unbreak the bind on the d4 square. But as we'll see, this just leads to a sort of problems on the light squares. After queen d2, rook e8, a kind of prophylactic move actually, a very interesting move. If he played rook a8, then maybe e5 is going to be possible for white. So this, in a way, it kind of discourages f5 in some variations and sees what white's going to do. It prompted white to play energetically with d4 now. Preparing d4 after queen f2, bishop c6, and now d4. So we see now the exchange of dark squared bishops. So has Fischer's advantage been lost here because he's lost grip on these dark squares? Not really, because he's got an active rook here, and this rook can also come to support the attack. This c4 pawn and e4 pawn, they're vulnerable. So white still has liabilities. They're just on light squares now instead of dark squares. Fischer played bishop a8, which unleashes some pressure on that pawn. White really doesn't want to play b3, giving this rook an even more powerful control of the 7th rank. White played instead rook a1 to trade off the rooks. Here now though, Fischer fixed that e4 pawn by playing e5. Not minding about creating a weakness here because it's totally unexploitable. And actually it won a pawn the way that Donald played it. He didn't play f takes e, because that would have been loosening his position in any case after d takes e. White's got too many weaknesses still. The c4 pawn and also this g5 pawn would be weak in some variations. So he just retreated his queen. Fischer now just exchanged off rooks, content just to win this pawn here. And Black is just increasing the advantage now. After b3, Fischer played knight c6. So the knight's very dangerous, much more aggressive than its counterpart here. And it comes into d4 now. So potentially g5 and b3 are attacked. b3 immediately, but if knight e6, then the g5 pawn will be attacked. So Donald played queen e3, and after knight c2 played queen a7. So just in time defending that rook from the fork, so attacking Black's queen. However, we have here a situation where although White's rook is active and able to win Black's d6 pawn, Black is winning this important pawn here to create a dangerous past b pawn, as we'll see now. Knight takes b3, knight c5. So not only is this a dangerous b pawn, the e4 pawn is now under fire. So White's losing material. This could be a completely lost position now with best play. After rook b6, b3, so Black can win that pawn now at leisure on e4. White played king g1, so Fischer finally took the pawn on e4. And after knight f3 played rook a8, so the rook's coming in quite decisively actually. In the game rook b5 was played, and this allows now a very neat tactic. White played b2, which actually wins the exchange, because White's forced to take that pawn, but after a check, the king unfortunately has to come to f2, where Fischer now does a fork, king and rook, just winning the exchange, because after king e3, knight takes rook. So Fischer's just the exchange up now, and immediately able to take that c4 pawn. So White's just been positionally and then tactically outplayed in this game, and Black's now has a clearly winning position. After knight e3, bishop h3, White, after playing this move, simply resigned. It's a bit hopeless. Perhaps Black can just continue with rook a4, cutting off the White king, and preparing, for example, knight f5 check. Let's have a look in conclusion and summary at this game, which was another good positional game from Fischer. First we see this classic kind of dark square attack in queenside expansion, holding up the f5 square. So White's attack never really got going. The a4 wasn't particularly good at stopping the Black's counterplay on the queen side. In fact, the a file was used later by White. Fischer came in on the dark squares, but there was a key reason also to prevent this f5. And when White had resigned himself not to be able to play f5, Fischer was quite content to have some exchanges of pieces actually. And Donald played even for d4 to exchange off the dark squared bishops. But White's problems were not over here, because it was the light squares the attack was switched to, especially after Fischer played bishop a8, unleashing the pressure on c4. And even after the exchange of rooks here, White now faced Black coming in with the knight on the dark squares to attack these vulnerabilities. So White ended up still losing material. But now we have a situation where Black was content to lose this d6 pawn in exchange for that b3 pawn, because it gave Black this dangerous passed b pawn. And it was through that b pawn which provided this nice little combinatory touch, b2, temporarily just sacrificing that pawn to get this knight fork, winning material and reaching a completely won position, which D.Byrne resigned after playing bishop h3 in fact. So that made it 9 games in a row Fischer had won in this 1963 US Championship. It was only 2 games left for him to have his 11-0 sweep. I hope you enjoyed that, and see you on YouTube. Thanks very much.